Ooh.
Good evening.
Hey, Jim.
Hey there.
Hello, good evening.
Doing.
Good.
Hey, Corey, if you
Karen,
could unmute John Landock. How are you, John?
Hi, how are you?
Nice to see you again.
It's wonderful to see you too, sir.
Sharon will be here shortly. She couldn't find the link, but I gave it to her, so we're good.
She's here.
Sure, yeah.
She's waiting.
Hi, Sharon. That was quick.
Mhm.
I'm going to
Hello.
be the secretary tonight because Nancy's not available.
Hey, Corey, can you unmute Carl Johnson too? Oh, you with us?
I'm with you.
All right.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
How's everyone doing?
How are you?
Pretty okay.
Um,
Actually, it says change.
I don't
Okay,
know.
okay. It says loop here.
Does it? Oh, it just happened?
Yeah.
Oh. All set then.
Okay.
Evening, right?
I think I'm okay. Thank you.
Hey, Chris, nice bookshelf.
I hear that a lot.
I heard that.
It's alphabetically arranged. You can't tell. My author's
alphabetical by
author's
author or by title? The
author's
librarian
last
in me wants to know. No,
last name, of course.
of
You know,
course.
though, Meg, I walked into Cora's bedroom a few days ago, and every book that she owns, which is hundreds, were all in stacks on the floor. And I went, "Oh, I thought you were cleaning your room. What's happening?" She was organizing them alphabetically to put back on her shelf by
I love
title
it.
because she's
I
8.
love it.
But
The
but
titles are
she was-
okay. It's okay. Titles
I
are
was
good.
like,
It's a good
She
beginning.
and Meg, you you gotta talk
Oh,
to Cora.
well, and I have to be honest, my bookshelves are a mess, but they're by subject. And I have 3 of them all over the house, and then piles of books every place else. So yeah, it's one of
Well,
those things
someday
I
when
was
the-
always going to get to, but never did.
Someday when there's no more pandemic, you and Cora will have to sit down. You can share your strategy.
There
your
you go.
organizational
Yep.
strategies.
So Laurel, did you tell her not to go by the A or the at the beginning?
So I didn't offer any advice, but later that night she said, "Okay, Mom, go to my bookshelf and find The Wind in the Willows." And I went to the W's, and she said, "No, Mom, it starts with the." So the answer is no. But there's room for improvement. It's all right. She's only 8.
It'll still get you there, it begins with the, and you just go to where the W's are in the.
And frankly, the most important thing is she knows where it is. So
That's
Well,
exactly
it
the
works for
point.
her.
Yep.
That's exactly it, right?
Yeah. Yep. If you can't find a book, it's no good to anybody. Who are we waiting for? I've been checking names off here.
Sue Bransfield's going to join us.
Sue Brandt, she should, because I saw her last night at the election place at the middle school. By the way, that was an absolutely brilliant place to have the election. The cafeteria was terrific. People moved through. We got so many compliments, Charles, on the fact that we did not have the parking lot full of teachers. It was brilliant. It really was.
Yeah, that's going to be the new norm.
Yeah, it was great. Plus we get to show off the middle school, which is kind of cool. Not just the little corner of it.
Hey, Charles. I just said, hello, Charles.
Yeah, Carla.
Could you have, John accidentally muted himself somehow?
Oh yeah, Dylan Bernard can hear us. He's running this from the TV.
Okay, okay.
Dylan, unmute John, please. There you go.
Thank you.
I just sent the bridge to Mike Pelton.
Okay, Susan's here. Tom Robinson's here.
How about Rick Shar? I know he said the other day he wanted to be on this call.
I did not see him.
I'll text him right now.
Yeah, I didn't see him. No, he's not. Does Stephanie need to be unmuted, Charles? She's here.
Stephanie's here.
Yep. Does she need to be unmuted?
Yeah, we can unmute her. So Dylan, mute Stephanie F. So there it is. Perfect. And we might need Tom at some point too. So.
Right.
Well,
And I don't see Jim Tripp.
Jim
Jim's
Tripp's
here.
right here. I've been talking.
Oh, there you are.
Oh, yeah, see, I'll just talk and then I'll pop up on your screen.
Perfect. Okay. Accounted for.
and
I'm the secretary tonight because Nancy Bakos was not available.
and Corey, unmute Sue Bransfield, please.
Jim Tripp. Hey, Rick, how you doing?
And Mike
Okay.
Pelton.
No mic yet.
Did you
Okay.
click on the live stream?
Oh, let's see.
You maybe clicked on the live stream if you, so you're seeing us, right? So if you get out of that and just above where it says live stream, you'll see something that says, it's underlined. It says, click here to join the meeting. Be a Board of Education meeting information.
I don't think there's quorum, Dave.
Yeah.
Right, for the 10-1 or I don't know.
Okay,
about
so
what it
just
is.
above with the live, in that same block as live stream, just above it, you'll see where it says click here to join the meeting. Yeah, so just, but actually click where it says click here to join the meeting that's underlined. It's actually a link.
Corey, we don't have anyone trying to get in on the YouTube side, do we? Everybody's coming in through Zoom.
Yeah, no, go up from there. Just go up from there. And right above where it says meeting ID, click on the underlined statement, click here. It's confusing because it looks like a title, but it's actually a link.
That's how I feel
It's
about it.
Portland.
The only one I don't see is Mike Pelton.
I just texted Mike.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you called. That's why I wanted to text you. All right, I'm gonna try to get, oh, you're welcome. All right.
There is a Rick. We're gonna assume there is a Rick there.
All right, I'm gonna give Mike a quick call because he's having trouble.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
This is Rick.
Yes.
All right.
Yes,
Yeah,
Rick.
go to the Portland schools, right? And then you gotta go into where it says Board of Education meeting information. And then I sent you the link if you were coming in on your phone. I texted you the link. Yeah. Click on that link, yep, and then it's same thing. Click to join meeting and then password Portland. Right. All right, we should be getting there.
We should play a game or something at least. Do a Mad Lib?
John, you're gonna
Good
show.
idea, Tim.
I was just saying, we're gonna show that presentation, right?
Yes.
Yes.
You want to get started or do you want us to wait?
I think we should start. It's already 6:40.
All right, Carl, why don't you introduce our presenters to us and we can get this show started.
Okay. Good evening,
right.
everybody. So I was asked to do a facilities assessment, and we contracted with the Gordian Company, who the town, we do a lot of business with for repairs and projects and everything like that. And I'm going to introduce to you two guys that ran the project for us, John Landock and Jake Haslam. I think I got that right.
Nailed it.
I will turn the meeting over to John.
Thank you, Carl. And then if I can just get the ability to share my screen, I can share the presentation as well.
Okay.
Okay. That works too. If you want to just scroll along, I can go ahead and just tell you when to change slides. So thank you for inviting us to join you tonight and share our findings from the condition assessment that we did with the district. This is referred to as our facilities assessment and planning analysis, or you'll see later on, it'll just be abbreviated to FA&P for short. I am John Landock, as Carl said. I am a service manager out of our Guilford, Connecticut office, and I am your account manager on this project. Joining me from Gordian is Jake Haslam. He is your data analyst on this project. First off, just want to say thank you to the Building and Grounds Committee who went through this with us last month and has already previewed all the information that we'll be reviewing tonight. And a really big thank you to Carl Johnson, who has been involved every step of the way. This has been a very thorough process to get to where we are today. It all started with us going on walkthroughs back over the summer. It was a small team of Jake, myself, and some of our colleagues. During these walkthroughs, we took a physical inventory of all of the assets under facilities and combined them into one project list. We have since gone through a line-by-line review with Carl and some of his supervisors and had multiple data verifications along the way to get this to where it is today. Pricing that you'll be seeing throughout this presentation comes primarily from our model, which is based off of RS Means pricing, another branch within Gordian, and also some direct quotes that Jake and I have received from local vendors or from Carl himself. As we go through, anyone who's unmuted, please feel free to ask any questions or discuss amongst yourselves, and I'm happy to facilitate that conversation as well. On the next slide, who partners with Sightlines? Want to just start off with who we are. So Sightlines is a facilities analysis and consulting services within Gordian. While we are primarily focused in higher education, we also service public and private K-12 systems, state systems, hospitals, and municipalities as well. On the right side of that slide, you can see 450 colleges and universities who have partnered with us, which gives us a very extensive database comprised of public and private institutions and ranging from very, very small up to very, very large and everything in between. Personally, I've worked with universities that have a smaller footprint than what you have in Portland, and I've worked with universities that are near 15 million square feet. So I've seen everything in between as well. Of these members, over 100 of them have now done our condition assessment with us. And I personally have been a part of, I've had my hand involved in somewhere between 20 to 25 of those. So I'm very familiar with this process and having gone through this many times myself. And we will be using our database as well as our previous condition assessments for comparison to provide additional context as we advance through this presentation. On the next slide. In order to provide that additional context to our database and to our condition assessments, we first want to have a couple slides just comparing your space profile and your physical inventory to that of our database. All right, there's a whole lot going on here. So I'll try to walk you through as easily as I can. This slide is normally easier with animations, but what we see here is the construction age of your buildings versus our database. And it's broken out into a few distinct construction vintages that we've noticed throughout our database. So first is pre-war. This is anything built prior to 1951. Next is post-war and modern, anything built between 1951 and 1990. And then finally, in the complex era is anything that has been constructed since 1991 onwards. That blue mountainous range, that dark blue graphic at the bottom there is a representation of all the buildings within our database and when they were constructed, which accounts for more than 1.5 billion square feet. That blue line there is a representation of the waves of construction here at Portland. And the labels are associated with each of the waves to show exactly what was built during each of those waves. So overall, looking at Portland versus our database, Portland has less space constructed in the pre-war era, less space constructed in the post-war modern era, and more space constructed in that complex era than what we see across our database, which means that overall, your buildings are younger than our database. However, I want to point out that Gildersleeve, Valley View, Brownstone, and even the original portion of the high school were all built before that first big boom in our construction database. And that this will really show when we're looking at the distribution of needs compared to our database and when we look at it by building. So while you are overall younger, it's worth noting that it is pocketed where some of your spaces are older and some of your spaces are younger than what we see across our database. And then on the next slide, in addition to looking at when your buildings were actually constructed, we also want to look at the implications that age has on your buildings. The chart here is looking at your buildings versus our database, broken out between construction age versus renovation age. And it's broken out into 4 different age categories. There are buildings under 10 in the light gray at the bottom of the charts, buildings 10 to 25 years old in the blue, 25 to 50 years old in the black, and then finally buildings over 50 years old in the red at the top of the charts. Generally speaking, as buildings shift upward in age category, so shifting from under 10 to 10 to 25 and so forth, typically they will experience increased capital risk and operational demands. The biggest shift here really coming when a building crosses over the 25-year threshold, as that's when major building components and their life cycles start coming due. So this is where roofs start being needed to be replaced, HVAC systems, plumbing, and electrical start to see some major capital needs really coming of age. So looking at this chart, comparing your construction age to the database construction age, overall a very similar distribution of space under 25 versus space over 25. The biggest difference here is that you have a lot more space in that over 50 age category. However, when the middle school was constructed back 15 years ago, the high school underwent a full gut renovation. And by doing this, the high school now looks, feels, and acts like a newer building than it would act if it was still deemed to be over 50. So that's what that difference between your construction age and your renovation age is. The offset of the high school going from over 50 and now falling into that 10 to 25 age category. With this in mind, now looking at your renovation age, you have over half your space under 25 years old compared to our database, which only has 44% of space under 25. So takeaway here is that you have a younger age distribution than our database, and this will really show when looking at your district's needs as a whole compared to our database. But once again, just highlighting the fact that this is really going to split where some of the buildings are going to be above and some of the buildings are going to be below. Next slide. Over this next section, we're going to be digging into our condition assessment findings. And we want to start by looking at the condition finding or looking at the findings by school. On the next slide, before we fully dig in, I just want to provide some vocabulary that I'll be using throughout this section, as well as the rest of the presentation as a whole. In that top box are timeframes. And for timeframes, we're looking at when projects should be addressed. And for all these projects, they're broken out into either A, B, C, or X timeframe. A means a project either is past due or should be addressed within the next 1 to 3 years. B timeframe are projects that are coming due within the next 4 to 7 years. C timeframe is projects coming due in the next 8 to 10 years. And finally, X timeframe, these are projects that we won't include in the rest of this presentation. However, that full project list that I said that we compiled and shared with Carl has those X timeframe projects in there as well. So that way you can continue to plan out your capital needs even past that 10-year scope. That bottom box there, system needs, some of the systems that we'll be addressing are HVAC, heating and cooling. This is really looking at anything with the movement of the conditioned air throughout a building. Electrical and plumbing are fairly self-explanatory. Safety and code, this is anything for fire detection and prevention. It's any security systems or upgrades to your buildings, ADA and accessibility needs, as well as any abatement within your buildings. Mechanical is looking at elevators and kitchen equipment. Interior shell is looking at the finishes within your building, so your floors, walls, and ceilings, as well as furniture. Exterior shell is anything to the exterior of the building, so this could include pointing, roofing, or any openings, including windows and doors. And then finally, grounds is hardscapes and softscapes, anything outside of the building level, but still associated with that school. Moving into the next slide. Now we're going to be, these next 5 slides are really going to be looking at the system needs within each of your 5 schools broken out by time frame. The school with the highest 10-year identified needs is Brownstone at $7.9 million. What we're looking at here is the total needs in millions of dollars broken out by system and also color coded by time frame. So on these 5 slides and moving forward, A timeframe will be represented in red, B will be represented in blue, and C timeframe will be represented in yellow. Here in Brownstone, HVAC and safety and code are the 2 highest need systems within the school. And these are both heavily concentrated in that A timeframe of 1 to 3 years. The other systems that are coming in at over $1 million are exterior shell, which is fairly evenly split between A, B, and C. Plumbing, which is primarily within the C timeframe, so a little more spaced out and not as pressing of projects. And then electrical, which is once again highly concentrated in the A timeframe. On the upper right-hand side there in that orange box, you can see some of the largest project costs for this building, along with their estimated project cost and the time frame in which we're identifying them needing to be addressed. The next 4 slides are going to have the same format as this one and are going to go into the details for all of the other schools. So now here looking at Gildersleeve, our 3 highest system needs are your exterior shell, grounds, and safety and code again. And once again, these are highly concentrated in that A timeframe. And then on the top right there, some of the highest project costs that are identified within Gildersleeve. Any questions on Brownstone or Gildersleeve before we move into the high school?
Yeah, the brownstone, if I understood correctly in that last slide, it was 70% of the wiring has to be replaced. Is that, what's that about?
Some of the wiring just needing to be addressed within the A time frame. I know Jake has the project list open. I'm not sure when the other 30% is falling, but it's not the whole building that needs to be rewired at the same.
Well, 70% of it. I just want to make sure I understand. Like throughout 100% of the, like 70% of the wiring needs to be completely replaced.
Yes.
Like what's wrong with it? Is it outdated? Doesn't meet code anymore?
Yeah, just as buildings age, wiring just doesn't keep up to current standards.
Can I ask a question about the Gildersleeve moving the playground? Is that a safety concern? What is the purpose or what is the reason behind wanting to move the playground, the playscape?
You want me to answer that, John?
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
Okay, so back a couple of years ago, we had Dr. O'Reilly had asked us to visit the parking lot, parking issues, the way the parking flows up there. And we brought in Jacobson's engineering firm out of Chester, who does all the town's civil engineering and stuff, and did a site evaluation on the property and came up with the plan to, if we were going to do a parking lot renovation up there, which it desperately needs.
Yep.
Thing would be to where the playscape is now, the parking lot would continue up into that area.
Okay.
And so then we would either move this playscape, or honestly, probably the age of it would the long term would probably be easier to just replace it.
Right.
And set that out on the back side of the building out into the lawn area, and then the parking lot and student drop-off area. There is a whole design for that.
Okay.
That was $1.7 million to redo that.
Okay. Thank you.
You could probably find that on Dropbox if you did a search for.
Thank you.
They had some nice engineering drawings.
How long ago do you think that was, if I'm going back to search?
2 years at least.
2 years. Okay.
I'm gonna say yeah.
I was on the Board of Ed at the time. So.
Longer than that, I believe. I was a recording secretary.
You were on, Jim?
Yeah.
So I bet it was 2014 or 2015 when we were moving the second grade up to Gildersleeve.
Okay.
That's when it was, because it coincided with getting rid of the temporary buildings at Valley View and the move.
Yes.
And the concern was the parking that was up there.
That's correct. Yep.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to the high school. Our top 3 system needs here are exterior shell, HVAC, and grounds. And what you'll see just visually looking at this is that these are really more spaced out over the timeframes than what we saw at Brownstone and Gildersleeve, which were heavily concentrated in the A timeframe. The high school, being a younger building from a renovation standpoint, is naturally going to have more of those projects pushed out in that B and that C timeframe. And it's also worth noting too, while we're on this slide, that many of the mechanicals within the HVAC, plumbing, and electrical systems are also serving the middle school. So when we get to the middle school slide, you'll notice that there's not a whole lot of needs within those, and that's because they're primarily being serviced from the high school.
If I could just interject for a second, I don't know if anyone else noticed, but there's a post in the chat that we need to approve the agenda for the minutes.
Yeah. I make a motion that we approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Tim and, okay, thank you.
Either
Sorry,
Sharon
carry
or, well, I think either we need to call for a vote, either Sharon or Sue.
Yep.
And we call for a vote, and then we can vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye, it's unanimous.
All right, as we were.
Yes, please.
Oh, and I can tell you the Gildersleeve plan you can find, it's July 2016 is when the it was presented.
Thank you.
Next slide, moving into Valley View now. Valley View coming in with a total of $4.8 million worth of needs identified over the next 10 years. Number one system cost here is the exterior shell, which is really bookended with A and C timeframe projects. And then the other system with at over $1 million is safety and code coming in at $1.2 million, primarily within that A timeframe. And then the last school that we have is the middle school, which is both the youngest school within the system, as well as the lowest total need building within the district. What you'll see here is that there is no system cost that's over $1 million. And it's also worth noting that if you look at some of the projects that are identified as the quote unquote high ticket projects here, most of them are significantly lower in cost than what we're seeing across the other buildings as well.
Am I correct in assuming when it says backlog, those are projects that we are overdue on? Is that what that's implying?
Yes. Yeah. Backlog means it's past its useful life cycle and would be visually identified in that A timeframe.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions on any more questions on the schools before we dig into the identified needs for the district as a whole? Okay. So over the next few slides, we're going to take a look at the needs for the district rolled together, and I'm going to bring in some database context as well. So now moving into slide 14. Perfect. Thank you. If you add together the cost of the last 5 slides together, we come up with a total of $28.2 million broken out over the timeframes A, B, and C. We have 17.5 identified in A, 6.1 million identified in B, and about $4.6 million identified in that C timeframe. On the bottom of the slide, we also have a table showing the total number of projects identified within each of these timeframes. And then taking that total cost per timeframe, dividing by the number of projects, we're able to see the total, the average cost per project for each of these timeframes. And to me, what's really interesting here is that each of these timeframes are coming in with a similar average cost. Just bringing in some additional context, typically when we do this type of assessment, we see a timeframe being about double the average cost of your B and C timeframe projects, simply due to there being a few very expensive projects all falling in that A timeframe. But your projects are more spaced out, at least the heavy hitter projects are a little more spaced out. So is having all your projects fall in right around that $40,000 to $45,000 average cost. On the next slide, on the left side here, we have your total identified needs, your $28.2 million worth of needs, visually shown and split out by time frame versus our database on the right. So we have 62% of your needs falling in that A time frame, 22% falling in B, and 16% falling in C. So compared to our database, which has about half of all projects in that A time frame, and then about 30% in B and 20% in the C time frame. Takeaway here is that while there are more A time frame projects in our database, this actually makes sense to us because when we think about the construction of your buildings, your first 3 waves of construction all hit before our database's first big wave. So we have 3 of your buildings really that are going to be heavily concentrated in that A time frame for project needs, and then your newer buildings are really picking up the majority of those B and C timeframe projects. On the next slide is another way to look at your total needs, and this is breaking out by system. In the dark blue, we have building envelope, so that's once again anything to the exterior of the building. Building systems in the light blue is your anything that's mechanical, so it's looking at HVAC, electrical, and plumbing. In the red is infrastructure. For you here at Portland, this would be purely grounds infrastructure. And the reason why it's about half of our database on the right is that our database would also have utility infrastructure thrown in there. But with your buildings being decentralized, there's no utility infrastructure. And so therefore, all of your infrastructure needs are falling under grounds. Space improvement, this is anything to the interior of your buildings in that light gray. And finally, safety and code is in orange. Major takeaway here, as I point out, infrastructure is about half of what we see across our database, but it's actually what we would expect to see without having utilities. And your building envelopes or your exterior shell and your safety and code are higher than what we see in our database. All right. Next slide is going to be looking at the needs for the district as a whole, broken down by school. So we look at each school individually, and now is looking at each school next to each other to see how much 10-year identified need is within each of the schools. And now, as we saw on the last section, Brownstone has the most total identified needs at $7.9 million. Versus the middle school as the lowest at $2.5 million. And now, while this is important, it tells us what the total needs are for each of the schools. It doesn't factor in the size of the school or the fact that not all these schools are equal. So on the next slide, I want to take a look at what these needs break down to when we divide by the gross square footage of each of your buildings. So as you see, this tells a slightly different story than what the last slide said, where Valley View, for example, was the second lowest in terms of total need. When dividing by the footprint of it, it now jumps up to be your second highest need building when looking at needs per square foot. And as I've been alluding to throughout, the age of the buildings here are really driving your capital needs. So we have the elementary and intermediate schools all above that $100 threshold, whereas the high school and middle school significantly below that. So from our perspective, this really breaks the district out into 2 portfolios, where the high school and the middle school are your low need buildings, and then the elementary and intermediate schools are your higher need buildings. with this in mind, over this last section now, on the next slide, building needs and project prioritization, we really want to break down your building needs and try to bring in strategies for future investments. Keep in mind that your buildings aren't created equal, and that, you know, your high school and your middle school are in very different conditions than where we have the other 3 schools. On the next slide, the right part of this should look very familiar, as we just looked at this one slide ago. This is looking at your dollar per gross square foot need for each of your buildings. The left side, though, is bringing in what your district average is per square foot versus our database. Your district coming in right around $75 per square foot worth of need versus our database at $90 per square foot. So thinking back to the age profile, I had highlighted that you had less need in that over 25 than what our database has. So it makes sense for us to see that your average cost of need per square foot for your district is less than what our database is. But once again, just highlighting that difference between the low need versus the high need buildings. So the high school and the middle school, for example, both coming in well below the district's average need per building or per square foot, whereas Brownstone, Gildersleeve, and Valley View are all coming in above what our database has. On the next slide, in addition to looking at your total needs, we also want to factor in the replacement value of each building. And by doing this, we can look at what the net asset value of each of your buildings is. On the bottom of the slide is the calculation for net asset value, replacement value minus 10-year capital needs divided by replacement value, and then indexed to 100. So what net asset value really tells you is what is the percent good within your district or within each of your buildings. For anyone who's familiar with the concept of an FCI, it's essentially the inverse of that. On the left side of the chart, you can see that the district as a whole is coming in at 80%. And once again, it makes sense to see that this is in a better condition than our database, which is coming in at only 74%. The story changes here, though, when we break this down by building. So on the right side there are investment strategies for different ranges of net asset value, where 85 to 100% we would deem to be capital upkeep. These are buildings that are in really good condition. You can be very proactive with your project selection, and you really want to try to keep your buildings within this stage. Drop down is that 85 to 70%. Now you're starting to see some more major projects come due. Once we get down under 70%, this is where the systemic renovations are really needed to make the buildings operate at full capacity or operate up to full standard, I should say. And then if they dip below 50%, this is typically where we would deem it to be a transitional building. And you really want to make some major decisions as to what the future of that building holds. So your district as a whole is falling in at 80%, which is right in the middle of that repair and maintain stage. But as I pointed out, your buildings are very different, and you actually have no buildings within this stage. You have 2 buildings up in the capital upkeep and capital upkeep stage with your middle school and your high school, and the elementary and intermediate schools falling within that systemic renovation stage. Overall averaging at that 80%, but once again, if you walk through the buildings, you have a very different feel when you're walking through the middle school and high school than you do when walking through the other schools or when looking at the building components that are making those buildings run and operate. And so this really just further highlights the need to view these buildings differently when it comes to your future investment strategies. Perfect. All right, on this slide, I want to take a look at some funding scenarios and what the projected impact to your district's net asset value will be in 10 years based off of these different funding scenarios. So on the left side there, that black bar, that's showing that right now in 2020, we have a total net asset value for your district coming at 80%. Using our model, we're able to predict that you would need to invest at approximately $2.6 million per year if you want to maintain that 80% over the next 10 years. For comparison, the dark blue and light blue lines are showing what your total district NAV could potentially go to if you were to invest at $1 million per year or simply not invest in your buildings at all over the next 10 years. Investing at $1 million per year, we're projecting about an 8% drop in net asset value, bringing your district's whole net asset value down to about 72%. Versus if you were to not invest in your buildings over the next 10 years, this would give about a 13% drop down to 67%. Now, we know that investing at these levels is very, very difficult. And so we want to bring in investment criteria to further explore project selection and make sure that the projects that we are investing in are going to give us the most bang for our buck.
So one of the questions that I've got when I look at this is, do you have this same kind of a curve or a net asset value projection per building? So we can see how the value of each building would be impacted over time based on their age and expectations, and what the required investment would be to maintain them or improve their condition.
I haven't performed that exercise, but we surely can do that.
Yeah, I think that's something that would be helpful for us to understand the components, because I think that's what we're really looking at here is how we're going to have to manage the individual components of our system.
Yeah, sure. Good question, Jim. Good point.
And this project list that we put together, hopefully it can help bridge that gap, and it can, while it identifies major projects, you can use that, and you'll see in a few slides that we've given a project prioritization score to each project, and that can help also identify how you can maintain your net asset value within those buildings. Moving on to the next slide there. Each of the projects within your project list is given an investment criteria. There are 5 criteria that each project can fall under. Reliability in red are any projects that, if not addressed, can result in program displacement within that building. In orange is safety and code again. In yellow is asset preservation. That's replacing building components in kind at the end of their life cycle. Blue is the economic opportunities. These are projects that, if addressed, can result in a savings on your operating budget. So you can experience day-to-day costs by investing in these capitally. And then finally, in the gray is program improvement, which is primarily focused on interior shell projects and projects of campus image. So once again, just highlighting the fact that your safety and code is above what we see across our database. And that's really being driven due to some security projects that we've identified. And now taking this concept of investment criteria and breaking it down by school, it's important to look at it as a district as a whole, but I think that the value really comes on the next slide where we see it broken down by school. So left side there is the chart that we just looked at on the last slide. And on the right side are the investment criteria broken down for each of your schools, broken down between Brownstone, Gildersleeve, Valley View, the high school, and then finally the middle school. First glance, first thing you'll probably notice is that the high school and middle school have no reliability need projects. So while overall 11% of your total projects are identified as reliability, they're all housed within the other 3 schools. And it's worth noting too that Brownstone and Valley View have the highest breakout of reliability needs at 17% of each of their total needs. And Gildersleeve's falling in at 14% of its total needs within reliability. Any questions on this before I get into project selection and prioritization? Okay, advance to the next slide. Okay, so as we identified a few slides ago, a lot of money needed to keep up with all of your buildings as they're coming due and that are identified within this project list. And short of increasing your capital spending to address all these projects, strategically prioritizing these projects can be useful in identifying which projects should be addressed versus which projects can afford to be deferred. I'm going to introduce a couple of different project prioritization scales over the next few slides. This first one here is the one that I would recommend, and we'll see in a few slides why I'm recommending this one over our second one. So what we've done is given each project within the project list a priority score that factors in some different metrics in order to give a weight to that project. This first recommended one is factoring in the investment criteria, the time frame of the project, as well as which building it's in, and giving a score based on that building as well. So starting with investment criteria, each project will score between 1 to 5 points, 5 being reliability projects, 4 are safety and code projects, 3 are anything that's asset preservation, 2 would be economic opportunities, and 1 is program improvement. Timeframe scores score between 1 to 3, where A would be 3 points, B would be 2 points, and C would be 1 point. So the sooner the project should be addressed, the more weight it will receive. And then finally, building condition score is saying that any buildings that have a total dollar per square foot need over $100, so your intermediate and your elementary schools, will receive a boost of 3 points to each of their projects. Anything between $50 to $100, so your high school will receive a boost of 2. And then any buildings or your middle school that's under $50 will receive a boost of 1. Now, if we add that together, investment criteria 1 to 5, time frame 1 to 3, and building 1 to 3, that means that our total project score could range anywhere from 3 points to 11 points. Whereas the higher the point value, the higher the priority for that project. Moving into the next slide. The left side here is looking at your district as a whole, broken out between low priority, medium priority, and priority, where we're saying low priority are any projects that score between 3 to 6 points, medium is 7 to 8 points, and high priority is 9 to 11 points. Low priority coming in for the district as a whole at 37% of all your projects, medium 46%, and then finally high priority would be 17%. On the right side, this is looking at that same scoring scale. So low, medium, and high between 3 to 11 points, broken out by school. Very similar to the investment criteria slide, you'll notice that when it comes to high priority projects, the high school and middle school have either none or very few projects. And then the other 3 schools, when it comes to those high priority, are significantly higher than what we see at the high school and middle school. And Brownstone actually has the highest percentage of highest need projects or high need projects at 29% of all its projects. So while it was of those 3 schools, it was the highest for net asset value, it also has the highest percentage of high need projects here. Next slide is just another way to potentially do a project weighting scale. And this one is doing it without factoring in that building condition. So it's looking purely at investment criteria and time frame scores. And once again, the same scoring rubric for each of those. But if we take out the building score, this means that our total project score is going to range anywhere from 2 to 8 points. Once again, with the higher the point value, the higher the priority. And then moving on to the next slide, you'll see why I personally am an advocate for the first one that I proposed. So on the left side, we have your district as a whole broken out between low, medium, and high. Low being anything that scores a 2 or 3, medium is 4 or 5, and then high priority would be anything that's 6 to 8 points. And on the right-hand side is looking at that same mix for each of the schools. And the reason why I personally am an advocate for the first one is that inherently this mix of high priority distribution doesn't sit right, where the middle school, which we all know is the youngest and has the least total needs within the district, is now coming in tied for the most in terms of percentage of high priority projects at around 30% of all the projects there. Any questions here on the project prioritization? All right. So getting into our takeaways from this presentation and from our condition assessment as a whole. That top point, that first blurb, really you can sum it up in saying that the age of the buildings are really driving the capital needs. So the buildings that are older and have not been renovated, as we identified, are the highest needs in terms of square foot and also the highest needs in terms of the priority of those projects. Second point, saying that we have a total of $28.2 million worth of needs, with 62% of it falling in that A timeframe. Third point, when spacing this total need out over the footprint of the district, we come in at $75 per square foot. So about $15 per square foot below our database average. And then when we factor in the replacement value of your buildings, we get a total net asset value or percent good for your district around 80%. Something that we really want to try to maintain moving forward. Fourth point, it's exterior shell is the highest total system need within the system at $6.6 million. And this is actually fairly evenly split over the 3 timeframes of A, B, and C, which gives us some flexibility in our project selection here. When we look at our next 2 highest systems of tech and safety and code, which are both coming in right around $5 million, the majority of their needs are being concentrated within that A timeframe, so 1 to 3 years coming due. And then finally, that last point, highlighting that Brownstone has the most high priority projects. And this is really being driven due to the high number of reliability needs that were identified in here, despite the fact that it actually has a higher net asset value than what Gildersleeve or Valley View are coming in at. Okay, that's all that I have prepared for us tonight. Once again, thank you for inviting us to join you. Are there any outstanding questions that you may have or anything else that you'd like to discuss?
I have a question if I could, Tom Robinson. Is there a list that's getting provided to Stephanie Frigola or Carl Johnson that has all these projects listed, broken down, so we can actually see the items? It's like an example of your brownstone, you're saying that there's a $1.2 million upgrade to the cooling system. There is no cooling system, so that's actually an additional $1.2 million project. It's just an add-on.
Okay, two answers. One, yes, there is that project list, which we have shared with Carl, and he will distribute as he sees fit. And two, that project that you just identified, you're exactly right. There is no current cooling system in there. That project was a modernization project to bring the building up to current standards and add cooling.
Tom, I requested that of them just so that a number could be seen, because I figured moving forward down the road with this project, somebody would say, well, did we think about an air conditioning system in these other schools besides the secondary school? And it doesn't have to be in there. It was just addressed so the number is there. It certainly can be taken out.
Yeah, it's fine to be in there. It just was, we'd like to, I think that it'd be nice to see, what's in the list, so that, we can, everyone can decide if it's what's needed and not needed, or what needs to be addressed sooner than later.
I have that list, and if talk to Charles about it, and I can get that distributed to everybody.
Is that list scored using, I guess, I agree. I think I agree with the method you talked about, prioritization. Is that list also scored in that manner?
Yes, we have those prioritization scores associated with each project. Any other questions or any other talking points we want to bring up?
No, but I just would like to say thank you for the extensive work that you did in putting this together. I think this is certainly going to take us into the 21st century and help us to develop the priorities that that we need to do to maintain the buildings in a very good way, and also to make plans for a much longer period of time than crisis management that we tend to respond to when things break down. This gives us a chance to be more proactive. So it is quite a list, Tom, and be ready to take a look at it. But I think this is really an exciting step forward for the school district, for the Portland Board of Education.
This is Phil, can I say something?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that this is a great introduction. I think there's going to be, of course, a lot more work necessary. So that, thank you very much for the introduction, but we'll need to schedule additional meetings and get additional support and information. The selectmen will take it up at a future meeting and see, in terms of working with the Board of Education, your committee, and see what a good work plan is. There's certainly a tremendous amount of information that is introductory, I would say, tonight, and we'll have to go into more detail to really begin to see how the town is going to move forward. But again, thank you very much. It's a very thorough report, and I look forward to studying it some more. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. I don't know if that was Ralph. I'm on my phone, and I'm going to have to leave the meeting because I need to convene the 7:30 meeting. So if you want to continue, we can hold the Board of Selectmen meeting until you finish. I don't want to stop questions, but at this point, I need to convene the other meeting because there may be guests waiting, but please continue. So again, thank you, and we'll speak later.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say is I was going to agree with what you said, Meg, and certainly Susan supported, is that we can't plan if we don't have details in order to do planning. And so this is invaluable for that purpose. And obviously, she's talking about the meeting. The Board of Selectmen are probably quiet because we all know we are already 3 minutes late to our next meeting. But certainly, this is going to be really valuable information. Thank you.
Charles, I have just a quick question. What are our next steps as the board? Obviously, the selectmen want to see the list of projects, but what would you recommend that the Board of Ed do at this juncture to prepare for more information to the Board of Selectmen, and also to prepare us?
Right, so I would just throw out an idea for folks to consider. And this is an idea Carl and I have been talking about. I mentioned it to Sharon the other night in the Buildings and Grounds Committee. But I think it's time for us to put together, for lack of a better description, a steering committee or a task force, sort of a representative group, maybe of Board of Select members, Board of Ed members, some teachers, some parents, and community members, a similar model to our reopening committees. And I'd like to take that group through a process this year of looking at this report, and then also lots of other data, like we need to look at some enrollment projections. We need to look at housing starts in the town. We need to take a more holistic look at where Portland is now. And I'm really thinking that this steering committee could put together some focus groups, do some surveying, and talk to the various constituencies in the town and develop, I'm going to describe a 3 to 5 to 10 year plan for the district. Certainly, I think what John has laid out for us is a plan that would have us sustaining 5 buildings for the 1,266 students in the district. I think it requires a broader look. Do we want to maintain 5 buildings? Are there other approaches that we could use before we sink millions of dollars into any one of our buildings? Let's go through a process now to reflect on what we want the Portland Public Schools to look like over the next decade. So, I would entertain a discussion and like to hear some ideas about, again, putting together a task force to go through and do the hard work necessary to look at more data sources and come forward with a vision for the district that'll propel us, over the next 5-10 years.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. It's the only way to approach it is systematically and, really dig in.
Yeah, I would agree with that also. So our work is just beginning.
Correct. I know the Board of Select people, you have to go off to your meeting. Yeah. Here's what I would propose. I'll follow up with Susan. I would love the opportunity to invite representatives from the Board of Select people and the Board of Ed and start this process. Let's get a working group together. Let's lay out some meeting times and talk about what a nice representative working group would look like. And again, I would model it on the work that we use for our reopening committees. I thought that those groups were very effective and very thoughtful and very deliberative. And I would like to now take us through a process that spends the rest of this year looking at lots of other data sources that we need to inform our thinking, and then asking the people that we represent and that are our stakeholders what they want to see for the district. And then, as we close out the end of this year and move into next year, again, we might then, I don't see any real emergency. I don't think we have to have this done during a pandemic, but I think we should start this process sooner rather than later.
I would agree. I like that idea. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, so
I agree.
Yep, I do too.
Yep. Sounds good.
Makes sense.
Great. So I know Board of Select people, you have to go. I will follow up
Yeah,
with Susan.
I'm gonna
tomorrow.
excuse myself.
And,
Okay, and we
That's
need
all
to,
right.
if.
And
are
we need to
We need to
motion
adjourn, a motion to adjourn is what Laura Sienna said.
I
I'll make
move
a
we
motion to
adjourn.
adjourn. There you
Lauren
go.
Christensen, and second,
I second.
Tim Lavoy, and the time is 7:39, and we're done. Thank you.
John and Jake, thank
Thank
you.
y'all.
Great. We really appreciate
Aye.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us tonight.
Thank you, guys. Sorry we made you a little bit late.
Night.
Good. All right. I have the minutes. I think Laura might have done some minutes as well from the town. So I will